Remember when Kashin Koji basically became Boruto's cheat code for surviving impossible situations? Yeah, somebody working in the office for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex manga apparently looked at all that and said, absolutely not, because the second that Amado turned Kashin Koji into a science project with a pulse instead of the guy reading tomorrow's newspaper yesterday, the safest man in Konoha might have quietly become the most in danger. And somehow, the person who should probably be sweating the most isn't Boruto Otsutsuki. It is the Hokage, Shikamaru himself. Join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto chief, takes a look at why Kashin Koji's vanishing act should officially be making Shikamaru fans nervous for what is coming in the future. Also, the newest round of Patreon exclusive videos are up on YouTube right now, from the strongest ninjas to never become Jonin to Damon's reflection Shinjutsu explained to every category of scientific ninja tech explained to a mega in-depth breakdown of how strong every version of Tsunade is, from Kid Tsunade all the way to current Tsunade. Big shouts out to the patrons whose pledges help pay for all those videos, as well as some of the others that are coming out of Patreon exclusive status in the weeks ahead as we continue into this summer. There is one detail from the last arc that keeps sticking out more than everything else starts falling apart. Not because it looked important at the time, because now it looks like the entire arc was quietly built all around it. Think back to Kashin Koji's conversation with Shikamaru, where we learned that the stakes were getting high for Shikamaru and had been getting higher without Shikamaru realizing it. He knew from his conversation with the elders that his Kage peers were beginning to question his leadership because of how he was handling the Boruto situation, but the feudal lord was a monster that Shikamaru, you can tell from his expression, hadn't seen coming just yet. Kashin Koji wasn't talking to him like someone discussing possibilities. He was talking to him like someone trying to preserve a very fragile equation. His warning was very simple. Kobu was going to investigate Shikamaru for secretly working alongside Boruto, and Kobu was already there within the village waiting for Shikamaru. That investigation was coming no matter what. And then Koji said something that should make every fan nervous in hindsight. He couldn't afford to lose Shikamaru's Hokage. He said the timeline depended on it, and even though Shikamaru stood a good chance at being removed as Hokage, he must fight back with every fiber of his being to avoid that from happening. And based on the fact that Koji tried more than once to get Kobu killed, it stands to reason that whatever Kashin Koji saw in a life where Shikamaru wasn't a Hokage, that future timeline was a very bleak one. That line wasn't there to make Shikamaru feel important, so much as it was to tell us as the audience that we are in a very dangerous territory right now. Shikamaru remaining as Hokage wasn't guaranteed, and the ripples in the flow of time could start out as simple wings of a butterfly that are flapping that ends up hiding the fact that there's a tsunami that we didn't even know coming that was beginning to start dredging up. It's one of the conditions required for Koji's chosen future to stay alive and for Jura to be defeated. Shikamaru needed to stay in power because or else the roads that are open would close, and finding another path to the desired outcome, it will become a lot harder. When you think about it, that is a completely different conversation. Because once somebody says they can't afford something happening, they're also admitting there are futures where it absolutely does happen. And Kashin Koji has seen those futures. That's what makes everything after the Mamushi battle so fascinating. Everyone focuses on the big moments. Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan going kaboom. Boruto saving Kobu from being served up to Mamushi. Inojin showing when it comes to killing innocent people, he's a Konoha shinobi first and a tool of Kashin Koji second. Code escaping after making the wise decision to not show up on the battlefield to kidnap Sarada. Koji getting kidnapped by Amado was a really big deal. So much so, it's in a situation where things are beginning to spiral in all the wrong directions. But the timeline probably isn't continuing to break because of one massive decision. It broke because of 100 tiny ones. As I said in the last arc, the common theme that we were seeing over and over, so much after the Kashin Koji versus Boruto situation was set up, is what happens when you start making 1,000 tiny human decisions. Think about Boruto saving Kobu. Think about Inojin not killing Kobu. When Boruto asked Koji whether he expected that outcome, Koji's answer wasn't no. He simply said it was a possibility, and then Koji's toe left before it said something he couldn't take back. That one sentence says a lot. Boruto wasn't completely off script. Koji had seen timelines where Kobu survived. But here's the part that people skip over. Koji still believed that Kobu needed to die. Not because he hates Kobu. Let's make that clear. Kashin Koji is not petty like I am. Like, I refuse to acknowledge the Super Bowls in 2018 and 2023. They never ever happened. The NFL just never played a season those years because the Philadelphia Dodo Birds stole the Super Bowl in both of those years. It was the biggest case of fraud that the world had ever seen before. Crooked referees, the ball had magnets on it, and so too did the goalposts. See, that's a level of delusional petty that Kashin Koji could never reach. Not because he's cruel, not because he's a hater, but because from the perspective of someone looking at countless timelines, Koji is somebody that's saying Kobu surviving probably created more problems than solutions, and Koji merely said, one life for the lives of billions. I'll sacrifice that life faster than Jerry Jones would kill a newborn child to get the Dallas Cowgirls in another championship game, and the Washington Communists would do the same thing to end that 34-year drought of no Super Bowls. That's terrifying, and not the stats about the Washington Communists or the Dallas Cowgirls. What's terrifying is Kashin Koji isn't making an emotional decision here. He's making statistical ones due to 10 directions being a major probability factory. Imagine watching thousands of timelines unfold. Every time Kobu survives, something goes catastrophically wrong later on. Say Kobu lives, Shikamaru gets removed as Hokage, Kiba is named the Hokage, and then Jura nukes the village because one of Kiba's dogs decides to relieve itself on Jura's foot when he's reading a book. Imagine Kobu lives, Shikamaru is arrested and executed, and after Choji's named the Hokage and eats the last sweet bean jam that Jura wanted, Kawaki gets kidnapped and devoured and Jura blows up the planet. Eventually, you stop asking whether or not saving him feels right. You start asking what price comes attached to saving him, and seeing that every time the timeline resulted in the world ending, he was the common issue. That's a really big question you gotta ask yourself. Boruto chose hope, Kashin Koji chose logic. Those two things don't often go well together. One is emotion-based and the other is probability-based. And now someone is going to have to live with whichever one was wrong. That's part of why the Boruto and Koji dynamic is one of my favorites in the manga. But Kobu surviving isn't the dangerous part. It's what Kobu was saying during the invasion, even after he saw Boruto had saved his life. He kept shouting his investigation wasn't finished yet, and he was looking right at Shikamaru when he did so. That line matters a lot, because the Mamushi battle interrupted his work. It didn't erase it. People are acting like the investigation disappeared because the giant Mamushi monsters that were attacking the village. Well, that's not how investigations work. Even if Kobu goes back to the feudal lord, the inquiries, they don't stop. If anything, now Kobu has more questions than before, especially after seeing Boruto and Shikamaru communicate. He's going to ask who exactly was feeding Boruto information besides Shikamaru. How did Boruto know certain things? How deep does this level of corruption run in Konoha? And if it goes too deep, should the feudal lord basically pull funding from the village altogether? Why did Shikamaru consistently make decisions that benefited someone officially labeled as an enemy of Konoha and a Hokage killer? Given Shikamaru became Hokage after Naruto was quote killed, Kobu might pull out the conspiracy theory map and try to connect the dots to say that Boruto and Shikamaru were working together in the greatest crime in history. Somehow, when Shikamaru gets thrown in jail, I don't see him getting gifted a special puppy to be in his cell in yoga classes, or the feudal lord giving him a pardon or some ice cream to lick while Tamari deletes all the photos that on Shikamaru's laptop that show him doing cocaine. He's going to ask, why did events continue unfolding exactly as Boruto predicted? Those aren't questions that magically disappear once the battlefield clears. If anything, they become easier to ask, especially now that the immediate crisis is over. Kobu has a chance to look over everything that has happened, and he might find himself believing he has less Uno cards than Shikamaru, and he's about to pull off the greatest comeback in history, unlike anything anyone has ever seen before. Kobu will finally get to tell the feudal lord that he's finished this story without having to invoke the name of his dead father and the need for celebrating fireworks. Kobu has potentially seen the dust settle on the battlefield, seen how various people who helped Boruto have been moving afterwards, and realized that he is indeed a visionary, he is indeed a revolutionary, and he will expose the corruption of the Shikamaru regime because he is very evil, very nice. If you're Kashin Koji, you might have even factored all of this in for your planning for the future, because some version of these events might have been shown with 10 directions. And there's another crack that happened during the Mamushi battle, small changes that kept piling up, and afterwards another crack appeared. Code escaped again. That wasn't supposed to happen either. Koji explicitly wanted Boruto to eliminate him and said, bro, these other two futures, one is a 1 in a million chance and the other one is basically game over. Boruto refused. Some fans saw that as Boruto's gonna prove Koji wrong, proving that he can change the future in a way that Kashin Koji never saw. Maybe that happens, or maybe Boruto simply traded one future for another worse future. Because now Code is still moving on the board, placing those claw marks, still acting independently, creating variables that Kashin Koji can no longer calculate, especially now that he's been knocked unconscious like he's method acting for the next Disney movie, The Princess and the Toad. And spoiler alert, Koji's not playing the Toad. That last part is what really changes everything, and not the method acting. The Kashin Koji being unable to calculate properly. That is a big deal, because after the Mamushi battle, Koji admitted something that should have sent alarm bells through the fandom. He hasn't received another 10 Directions update and is basically flying blind right now. Think about how insane that is. Before every major shift eventually produce another glimpse into the future, Koji at least had a rough idea where things are headed. Now, nothing. Complete silence. It's almost like the future itself stopped sending out notifications. Imagine driving across the country using GPS. Halfway through the trip, your signal disappears. The map freezes. Road closures keep happening. Traffic keeps changing. Bridges, they've collapsed around you. Detours are appearing. And your GPS is still insisting you're on the fastest route available. And you're on the same road from 2 hours ago. That's basically where Kashin Koji is right now. He remembers the route, he just has no idea whether or not that road still exists the way that he remembered it. And before he can even figure that out, Amado shuts him down, which again, I know he was in a hard place, and this is us as readers having the benefit of dramatic irony. We know stuff that Koji doesn't, in particular that Amado is not allowed outside of that lab as a part of his conditions to join Konoha unless he gets the permission from Naruto or Shikamaru. But seeing Amado out and about is as big of a red flag as me not being a Liv Morgan simp. If that ever happens, you better send out a search party if you ever hear me say anything bad about that woman. That might honestly be the biggest timeline shift in the entire manga. Not because Koji lost a fight and got packed up before a punch was ever thrown. Another thing him and the Naruto manga version of 1010 have in common. Konoha just lost its early warning system, and it's a big deal as we head towards the climax of the Shinju saga, which by heads towards the climax, I mean we're a couple of big battles away most likely, and a handful of subversion of expectations away from it. For a long time, Koji has functioned almost like an air traffic controller. He couldn't stop every disaster, but he could at least warn everyone when two planes were about to occupy the same piece of sky. He was that trusted weather radar system that people in Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley rely on in the US, because who knows when another EF3 tornado drops down in the middle of the night like it would for the people in Dixie Alley. Shouts out to that one guy who threw a bottle of whiskey at the tornado. No idea if he lived or died or not, but do you know how drunk you have to be to throw a bottle of Jack Daniels at a tornado thinking you can stop it? Which, speaking of Jack Daniels, Uncle Near's premium whiskey absolutely clears, and this is coming from somebody who hasn't touched whiskey in 5 years and counting. Now, however, there's silence. There are no updates, no visions, no corrections, no course adjustments, nothing, not even an Uber Eats. And who benefits the most from that, ironically, is Shikamaru, the one person that Kashin Koji said couldn't be lost. Shikamaru's greatest strength has never been his power. It's been information, it's been his brain. He's dangerous because he usually knows more than everyone else, and he's good at predicting what other people are going to do. He's a brilliant strategist. He always plans 200 moves ahead. Kashin Koji, all he did was become another tool for Shikamaru to use. Even though Shikamaru didn't know every single detail with 10 directions, he knew enough based on what Koji gave him to help map out those strategies that they came up with. I think the most dangerous Shikamaru is the one that knows he's got a target on his back, and if Kashin Koji's out of the story for any extended period of time, or is unable to assist him with 10 directions for an extended period of time, I think Shikamaru is crafty enough that he can navigate and potentially stop this whole Kobu situation on his own. Even if Shikamaru manages to talk his way out of Kobu's investigation, that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll survive it politically though. Those are two different battles. Shikamaru spent his entire Hokage career basically being the smartest guy in the room. The problem is that intelligence only gets you so far when evidence starts piling up against you. And based on everything that Kobu has, the picture don't look good for Shikamaru. Even if Shikamaru tried to explain the situation, explain omnipotence, explain 10 directions, it's one of those things where you're not going to be believed. Imagine Shikamaru having to explain to Kobu and saying, just trust me, man, that frog guy, he can see 1,000 futures. Shikamaru would be locked up in a hospital. I do think there's a possibility that Boruto unknowingly saved the one person capable of removing the Hokage, and that it just increased the chances that Shikamaru will lose his position. Kobu made one thing crystal clear, even as everything went sideways. He was not done. He was swearing to take down Shikamaru. We cannot stop talking about that, especially now that we know we're in a portion of the timeline that is so far removed from anything that Kashin Koji ever saw. This is the moment where Shikamaru gets an opportunity to get his moment as Hokage, to show that big brain of his. Shikamaru's in a position right now where the consequences of failure, they're going to ripple far beyond any one single battlefield. And from a writing perspective, that's exactly how you raise the stakes without constantly having to introduce bigger explosions and bigger, stronger enemies. Good writers don't always have to raise the floor. That is something that whenever I talk about raising the stakes, people just focus on the battle element of it. Oh, we need a bigger, flashier jutsu, a stronger enemy, and etc. We need depth. That isn't necessarily the only way to raise the stakes. Raising the stakes also happens when you raise the floor of a story. That's what something like this feels like. Going the political route and putting more pressure on Shikamaru, that is raising the floor of expectations. That is something that you could play with. And it's something I do hope that the story does play with moving forward. Obviously, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, clicking on the left to check out this Naruto Explained video, or clicking on the right to check out this video that YouTube says you would probably enjoy watching.